You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Over the last 50 years, few institutions have impacted regional development more than the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. On the one hand, it has become the single most important transportation link between Greater Cincinnati, the rest of the United States, and the world. The result has been explosive growth. Whereas the airport handled 6.8 million passengers in 1994, a master planning study conducted in the mid-90s projected that figure would more than double to 14.2 million by 2011. Over the same period, the number of airplane takeoffs and landings is also expected to increase sharply. Note, however, that the rate of increase is not quite as steep as the passenger growth curve because of the expectation that airlines will introduce more so-called Stage 3 aircraft that are larger, carry more passengers, and also quieter. To accommodate this growth, the airport plans, among other things, to build a third north-south runway and extend the length of the east-west runway. Make no mistake, the airport is more than a transportation facility. It is also the principal driver of regional economic expansion. Hundreds of American and international companies have established facilities near the airport because of its connections for both people and cargo. As a result, Boone County has been transformed from the rural fringe into the fastest growing portion of the tri-state. But for people living under the flight paths of the airplanes in Boone and Kenton County in Kentucky, as well as Greene and Delhi Townships and the city neighborhood of Sailor Park on the north side of the river in Hamilton County, progress has also brought challenges and frustration. Several weeks ago, 12 News reporter Frank Graff prepared two reports. One focused on the impact of the new north-south runway on western Hamilton County, the other on the impact of the lengthened east-west runway on Boone County residents. Here is a synopsis of those two reports.
The Delhi bombs practice under the north-south runway flight path.
It's starting to get worse and worse, and I know they're talking about putting in a new runway, and it's causing a lot of issues out this way.
The new runway has plenty of people shouting.
Last night, for example, they were sending planes up at 12:30, at 3:30, and at 5:30. And the point is that we are getting hammered by that runway, and they're using it more and more.
Hamilton County Auditor Dusty Rhodes wants a 1988 agreement with the airport to send planes away from populated areas enforced.
There was going to be a tower order that would protect us from specifically the noise as well as all the toxic pollutants that are coming off these planes, and it's not happening. They're liars.
The better you can narrow that departure path and keep them over the river, the less people you'll overfly, and in terms would reduce noise over those residential areas.
The airport wants federal money to build a new navigation system guiding planes over the river, missing populated areas.
You're not able to answer or be responsive to everybody's request. You have to, as the airport, balance all of those and try to make the best plan that you can for the entire compass points around the airport.
The residents of Dartmouth Estates call Delta, U.S. Airways, DHL, and all the other airlines neighbors. They see and hear them occasionally. Everybody knew the airport was nearby, but folks say they didn't know about a runway expansion until they got word their houses were to be soundproofed and jets could be flying right over them.
They really made a point to make me believe that it was going to decrease the noise considerably, but I still tend to wonder, it's going to move it out another 1,000 feet, that to me they're going to come in lower, or in this instance, if they're supposed to only take off from that one runway, take off lower.
This Route 20 will be moved over this way.
So around maps of the project, doubts soared as high as the planes that fly into CVG. The new north-south runway is needed to ease delays. An expanded east-west runway is needed for overseas flights.
They want me to soundproof the house and then fly over me.
Some 300 residents on the airport's west side must have their homes soundproofed. 200 other houses will be torn down.
They ask us for our input, but they never use it.
Airport officials hear the charges and respond they can only reduce, not eliminate, the runway's impact.
That's what this is all about, is to hear what everybody has to say. But if you want to please everyone, then I think maybe I don't know how to do that. I really don't know how to do that.
To discuss the proposed airport expansion and its implications, I am joined this morning by three guests. Barbara Schempf, who you saw in one of those packages, is the Government Affairs Noise Abatement Manager for the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. She leads the airport effort in developing the environmental impact statement concerning the proposed new north-south runway. Gary Langenbrunner lives in Green Township in Hamilton County, very close to Delhi, north of the airport. He is leading an effort to petition the FAA to insulate and soundproof those homes in the same way that Boone County homes are being soundproofed in certain northern Kentucky developments. Gary Moore is the judge executive of Boone County, Kentucky. The judge executive, in effect, is the #1 elected leader in a county and the basic administrator of the county. Everybody, welcome to Newsmakers, and thank you for being here. Barbara, let's start with you. How important is this expansion of these two runways? And there's other things that go along with this: expansion of parking, changes in the facilities, passenger facilities, all sorts of things. But I don't want to get bogged down in all those. How important is this to the life of the airport?
It's very important, and we can look at it in terms of, you know, those airplanes are coming to this airport whether or not we build this runway. And if we don't build it, those airplanes will be in the sky longer, causing more noise issues or environmental issues, more delays, which means more money to the airlines, which in turn could be a fare issue. It also means more delays to the flying public. If we don't get those aircraft on the ground as quickly as possible, it's going to be a domino effect for the whole community that operates out of our airport and then the public that's around our airport. So it's critical to keeping this airport a #1 airport in this country and being responsive to all of our customers.
This airport, I mean, the issues we're talking here this morning aren't brand new, and this is a continuing process. When did the airport propose these two expansions, and realistically, when would you like to see construction begun and completed on these?
Going way back in the early 1990s, we started the master plan process in 1991. That was when we actually brought the community together to develop where should we put a runway or what should we do with development. And that was approved in 1996 by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and then the next step in the process was this environmental review, which started in '98. We anticipate having an approval on the study by the end of this year and an opening of the runway in 2005.
2005?
Yes.
That's the north-south?
That will
also
be the
the east-west?
Yes.
Okay. Gary, right now, where you live in Green Township, close to the edge of Delhi Township,
right?
What's the situation at your house on a personal level, as opposed to, is this a current problem for you, or is this new runway going to be the problem for you?
Dan, we fully understand our communities, that being Delhi, Sailor Park, Bridgetown, Green Township. We fully understand we're not going to stop the existing runways or even the new proposed runway of 2005. We know that, but we want the FAA and the airport to, #1, realize that our communities were established long before our airspace was rated with this noise pollution and air pollution. Also, with the petition that we're forming now, we feel like we deserve the compensation that Northern Kentucky has enjoyed. We think it's the ethical thing to do, the FAA, to come to our communities and see the proximity close to the flight paths, these neighborhoods that are being affected. Since I've been involved with this petition, I've talked to a lot of people. People tell me over and over again, I'm woken up at 5:30 a.m. This morning I noted myself the first flight that I heard anyway was 5:49 a.m. That's a major intrusion to our quality of life. Sitting on the back porch in your patio having company or just enjoying that cup of coffee on Sunday morning, these flights are coming down literally every minute to 2 minutes, and it's just a major, major intrusion.
Let me make clear. First off, this is a copy of the petition, and you're petitioning the FAA.
Correct.
What you were saying here is that because you live north of the river, because you live in Hamilton County, that you don't get the same benefits that people who live in Gary Moore's area in Boone County in terms of soundproofing get? Is that there is really a difference here in what's available to people north of the river versus what's available to people in Boone County?
That's exactly right, Dan. The FAA has told us that they have done studies in our communities, and it's under the noise ordinance that's necessary. And then they're going home at night, and I guess feeling good about the noise in our communities, which anybody that's lived there or experienced that knows that the noise is just, it's tough to live with, and it's very intrusive, and we feel like that it's the right thing to do for them to at least compensate us. We know it's not going to go away. We know that this is something that we're going to have to burden because it's not going to change, but at least we feel like they should come in and help us where they can, and we know they can.
Barbara, what are the legal issues involved here? Is it simply the noise level? Is it the fact that this is another state because we're dealing with a two-state situation here? What is it that changes the people in Delhi, Sailor Park, Green Township versus the people in Boone County?
Really what it comes down to is that the airport, through its noise studies that we have conducted, we're following the federal regulations. The Federal Aviation Administration recognizes a specific noise level as an impact to a residential home. And they define that noise level as a typical average annual day, and basically have told airports that a single-family residential home inside of a 65 DNL, or average annual day, is impacted by noise. And really what they're going on and saying is anything outside of that level is not impacted by noise, and therefore the airport's not able to offer a federally funded program.
In other words, the federal government will not pay for noise abatement opportunities. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So it's the federal government is setting levels and limits so that they say if it's worse than that, we'll help people out with tax dollars. If it's not, we will not.
We'll help people out with the airport funding, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And Gary, in your community, there are homes that are going to receive noise abatement. What does that mean, and what does the government, what does Boone County government's role in all of that?
Well, you mentioned tax dollars a moment ago, and really the dollars that are used by the airport are a combination of some federal dollars, but primarily charges that are levied by the airlines and things of that nature. There are no county tax dollars that go into these programs. But what we find in Boone County is a situation where there are people that the airport makes those offers to that do not want to stay there. In some cases, they would rather have their home bought and be gone. Others want to stay there. You have elderly people who have lived there all their lives who might say, I'm happy here, I do not want to go anywhere. I'm willing to take the sound insulation if that's going to help, but they would rather not be impacted at all, of course. The main issue we have in Boone County is where these corridors are established, and 97% of all the noise contours for this airport are in Boone County, and those other 3% are in Kenton County. None of the noise contours, I believe, reach into Ohio.
Is that correct, Barbara?
Based on the 65 DNL level, that's correct.
And when we're talking about noise contours, if you remember the map that was shown in the package that we aired, you could see those lines drawn as contours. They look like oval-shaped lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our issue more in Boone County is once those corridors are established, we are encouraging the airport to use more advanced technology, flight management systems, things of that nature, to keep that corridor tight, to keep the noise where we're told it's going to be. Where we have problems is when planes venture outside those corridors and we start impacting communities who have not been soundproofed, who are told you're not going to have that level of noise, and that's where our issues come in so many times.
To what extent can the airport control those corridors or modify those corridors to take it away from populated areas, even if you don't legally have to do it, take it away from north of the river as well?
We are, out of this last noise study in the environmental impact statement, looking at new technology in the cockpit itself, so that that pilot is using either flight management system, which is a computer-aided tool, to align that aircraft with a specific ground track, let's say the river corridor or the interstate corridor, to keep them where they're supposed to fly. They're using that with the flight management system and also the global positioning satellite system, or GPS. So that new technology can only help airports and communities around airports as you're more able to define the flight tracks.
How do we know what the sound levels are over Gary Langenbrunner in this case? In northern Kentucky is separate because everybody admits that that is impacted under the legal limits. How do we know what the levels are over there? People say it's loud. How do we know what they are? How do we measure them?
I think it's important, too, to recognize that noise is very subjective. And what we're trying to do through the noise studies is model noise, and we model that through our computer model, and we generate noise contours. But we only go out to the 65 because that's the level of impact defined by the federal government. There's noise beyond the 65, and we do recognize that. What we're trying to do with the new technology is to reduce the noise for those that are on the sides of flight paths. We're also starting a portable noise monitoring program, so we'll be able to put portable noise monitors in communities such as Gary's to verify what the noise levels are and let them know what actually it is out there. Often, you know, because it is so subjective, even with providing the information, they may not be as happy with the information. They want some more.
Well, I know there's a lot still to be said, and Gary may not be happy with that answer, but I have to take a break. Stay right here. We're going to continue. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll continue about noise and other issues related to the airport. Welcome back. If you remember in that package, Dusty Rhodes, who cares deeply about this topic, was really, what he was referring to is that this noise, I think many of us who don't live near the airport think of the airport being active during the day. We don't realize that the airport's a 24-hour operation, especially with DHL coming in the middle of the night. And also, as I understand it, he was referring to the fact that from his perspective, there is a change of policy in terms of what are called run-ups, and where the airlines are allowed to test their engines, warm their engines up, run up at the ends of the runway, creating a lot of noise even though they're still on the ground. Has there been a change of policy?
There has been a change of policy, yes. And to further expand on that, the change came out basically due to safety reasons, which safety is #1 at the airport, and I think we all agree that that's the way it needs to be. With the major focus from the federal government on runway incursions at airports, and if you recall, this airport was noted as one of the airports we have to look at about runway incursions.
Runway incursions means?
Means when an aircraft would be landing or taking off that another vehicle would be in the path. Okay. For instance, an aircraft taxiing.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're sending aircraft out, as I understand it, to the ends of the runways to do their engine run-ups?
In the old program, which Dusty was referring to, they used to taxi to the furthest part of the airport to the end of the runway, which means they had to cross active runways to actually get to the run-up location. This became a concern. And so we looked at how do we modify this but still look at noise. And so the policy change really is, do your run-up at the gate, hangar, ramp, which is on airport, not on a runway end. If you can't do it there, then go to a runway end. And we're talking, you know, minimal times that you'll see an aircraft actually go to a runway end to perform a run-up. All of the airlines prefer to do them at the ramp or their hangar because it saves time, fuel, which is money, and again, safety again. You don't want to taxi aircraft.
Gary, have your residents complained about this change of policy? Have they noticed any sort of change in noise because of this change?
Yes, we've had comments from citizens that there are noise impacts at different times than what they used to be. They don't know why that is, and that's what we're finding to be the case.
And has Boone County government lodged any sort of protest, question, whatever?
Basically through our noise abatement committee, which I appoint, that's where that takes place, and we have citizen representatives on that committee that bring those issues to the airport.
Gary, what about you? Have the people in your area noticed a change in noise recently?
I've heard that quite a bit. Barbara states that the impact is minimal, but when you're woken up on 5:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, that's not minimal in your own little life. So I've heard that quite a bit lately. Yeah, the noise has been at different times of the day. The noise has been louder in some instances, and Dusty Rhodes is speaking from the hearts. He lives in Delhi. He hears these things going on through the middle of the night and the early morning. So again, we understand the safety situation, but our communities, being Northern Kentucky and Western Hamilton County, we're always the ones taking the brunt of these changes.
Gary, I'm aware of time, and I want to move on to a slightly different topic. One of the issues is in Boone County particularly, where a lot of the homes that are being impacted are new homes, relatively new homes. Now they have to be soundproof, there has to be noise abatement, or some of them are being bought and torn down. How is it that people didn't foresee what was going to happen, and they put homes in a place where now it's going to cost tax dollars to fix them or remove them?
basically what takes place, we find this also with state and federal highways. Many times there's a long-range plan of what is hoped to be accomplished, but until those dollars are allocated to build this new runway, for instance, to preserve that corridor, to not allow homes to be built there, is speculation. I mean, that land may never develop as a runway. Therefore, the people that own that land that is not on airport property, that say, you know, as a landowner, my property rights are such that I should have the ability to sell this land to a developer, to a builder, and until it's bought by the airport, it's hard to stand in the way of that.
So it's buyer beware when you're buying.
Now, what we have done as a county, some of the new developments that we've approved that are near, now that we know that this runway is moving forward, there are a couple developments that have taken place in the last year. We are requiring the developer of that community to post signs. We're also asking them in their deed and in their paperwork with their lot sale to notify the buyer that they will be locating near the proposed new runway. Okay. So we are working on the buyer beware issue once we know that that runway is moving forward.
Okay, we know that a third north-south runway is moving forward. There's also been talk of a fourth north-south runway in the future. Are you planning for that? Is that a reality? I mean, I know that there's nothing concrete, but is that going to happen?
Well, we have to look at it, and we were asked by the county to identify maybe in a sense, the largest land envelope the airport could envision so that they can do some of their county planning that they need to do.
And that includes a fourth?
We did look at a fourth parallel.
Did you look at a fifth or a sixth?
Not to this date. We will be looking at a master plan.
But it's not impossible to imagine?
Not impossible to imagine, no.
So that 20 years down the road, we may be talking about as many as 6 north-south runways. I have heard 6 used.
It's not impossible. We have to look at it in the next master plan, which will start in 2002.
Realistically, Gary, what do you want the federal government, the FAA, or the airport to do, recognizing that right now the law, it sounds to me, sort of blocks you out? What do you really want them to do?
Dan, I think it's interesting, too, to maybe take one step back. We're talking about right now 2 existing runways and a third one proposed for 2005. But for those 2 existing runways through our community, there are 4 flight paths that end up on those 2 runways. So it's just not 2 flight paths coming through our community right now, it's 4. The additional runway may make it 5 or 6. I don't know how that works. What we expect, and again, we know we're not going to stop this expansion. We know we're not going to stop the runways. We're really, we're just in a bad position, and I don't think it's going to get better. But what we'd like is some compensation from the FAA, some consideration. We think it's the ethical thing for them to do is to come out and insulate our houses.
And is the only way that's going to happen, Barbara, is if the rules are changed, if the federal laws are changed, so that this 65 number is altered?
In order to be able to fund and actually implement the program, the FAA would have to look at changing those rules.
Gary?
I would like to add that this airport operates primarily in a south operation. There's much more noise generated on a takeoff than there is on a landing. So primarily the planes are landing from the north toward the south. They're coming over the Ohio neighborhoods and touching down on the runways. But when they're taking off, when they're revving up, when they're accelerating coming off that runway, they're primarily south of the airport. And those communities are receiving the highest level of noise a majority of the time. And the west runway is all over Boone County. So, you know, we encourage the airport as much as possible to distribute that noise evenly and to operate in a northerly
But are you
pattern
therefore saying take off to the north more often?
We would
so
like
you would like to see more noise going over Hamilton County?
We would like to see it distributed more
Could
evenly.
that then, though, allow them to then get abatement because there would be more noise, but they would then be above the 65 whatever?
In a sense, more departures would move that noise contour because the contour is driven by departure activity, which is, as Gary said, the loudest operation.
And we understand, Dan, that the departures and the arrivals is all based on the wind. And we are seeing more and more departures over the western Hamilton County community than we ever have, significantly more. I don't know why that is. They tell us it's the wind. It doesn't seem to make sense.
I have one final question. We got less than 30 seconds. Is there any airport in the United States that's doing a significant different job with this noise control than what Greater Cincinnati is?
No, we're doing the same things and even more than other airports can even do. We go look at those other airports' noise programs to make sure that we have the best program we can have here at CVG.
Okay. complicated set of questions. We didn't even get to roads, and I know they're there. But thank you very much for being here, and we'll try to keep following this.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week for a special look at Cincinnati's atomic plant. Fernald will mark its 50th anniversary in May, and we'll take a look at the opportunity at its past, its present, and its future. Have a good week.